What's going on, guys? My name is Orphan. How are you all? As you can tell by the title of this video, today we're going to be talking about and what a wonderful game it is. Let me just preface this video because I don't know how long it's going to be. If you want the TLDR, this game is amazing, and all the praise and accolades this game has been receiving, it's all warranted. To put it simply, this is FromSoftware's best game that I've ever played in terms of content, in terms of world building, considering it's a new IP, in terms of visuals, although there are certain instances where, isolated game like Bloodborne could look better. Overall, the art style and all the things that are just included to flesh out the different sections of the game worlds and the interiors, the legacy dungeons that exist within the game. It's beautiful, man. Even if the graphics, aren't super crazy from a fidelity standpoint, just everything else that goes into it just completely takes your mind away from that because everything else looks so good. Gameplay is absolutely the best it's ever been in a From Software game. I think that could be contentious depending on what your favorite From Software game is. Like if it's Sekiro, obviously this is a pretty big gameplay difference from Sekiro. But if it's any of the other FromSoft games or just their formula in general, I think it would be very tough to disagree that this is the best they've put together up to this point. Now, based on everything I'm saying, this sounds like the culmination of FromSoftware's work thrown into an open world setting. If you deduce that, then you would be absolutely correct. This game is massive. It's huge. It's unbelievably huge. Like, probably one of the biggest games I've ever played as far as density. It's fucking crazy. Like, there's many times where I, begin exploring a section of the game, I was uncovering some of the map, and then I start maybe thinking like, okay, we're probably nearing the end here, and I couldn't have been more wrong every single time. It is actually genuinely nuts how much they've put into this game, which just left me with the question in the back of my mind the entire time I was playing. Exactly how long were they developing this game? Because this kind of stuff it's unprecedented. It's rare. You don't see a game come out, this feature full just like that, with no real caveats. Like there's no DLC shit you have to deal with. It's just all there, for the most part. There's really no guiding you towards a large chunk of it either. It's just they drop you in and you just go find this shit out. Like, it is fully up to the player and what kind of experience they want to have for the most part, how much stuff you see in this game. And again, that's unprecedented. In most games, there's kind of like a set amount of content, and you have a general idea of how long it would take the average person to finish it, and the ballpark doesn't really extend too far to either side. So like if the game's expected finishing time is like 12 hours, you might get a guy that could take 10, you might get a guy that could go upwards of like 17, but even then that's not still so far away from, that initial 12-hour mark. I've seen instances of like people discussing the game where they say, they have 30 hours and they've just beat the main boss in Limgrave, which I absolutely believe. Like, this game is that fucking insane. And a lot of the time you're playing it, you don't even realize how much time is passing. Like, you'll just play a session of like 4 or 5 hours, explore a bunch of shit, and you're just like, holy shit, I just spent 5 hours doing that. It's absolutely nuts. Again, just something I want to throw out there before we start diving into the specific mechanics and different aspects of the game. This is, I believe, one of those games that will be talked about from this point moving forward. And I think for me personally, it is one of those standout games of like an experience that I won't forget. Like, it's special. It's up there with like Witcher 3 and such. And I think it's not too early to say that based on what I've gotten. And in this case, it can only really get better because there's still stuff I haven't done. There's DLC, there's optimizations that can be made. So with all of that into account, this is a very special game. Very special. So first, I'm not a big music guy. You know, I don't get in here and talk about how these composers channeled their inner fucking Beethoven. Like, I'm not super technical when it comes to like music and soundtracks and stuff. The only thing I can really pinpoint is if my ears hear something pleasant and I can acknowledge and confirm that it was pleasant. In this case, the boss OSTs, when you're fighting, you know, big enemies or big story enemies, it's incredible, right? As soon as you enter the arena, cutscene happens, boss gets ready to drop his schlong on you, and the OST just booms out and you're just like, oh yeah, this is serious. Every time, it never fails. So if you like big bombastic scores anytime you're fighting an enemy that could probably absolutely demolish you if they just looked at you hard enough, this game will do it for you in that department. Visuals, again, we touched on it. I said, you know, it isn't super crazy from a fidelity standpoint, but art style and just the presentation, how they unfold the world and the color palettes they use and the designs they use for like the castles, the open world sections, the caves. It's beautiful, man. I'll never forget stepping out into Limgrave and seeing the gigantic golden tree and just staring at it. That gold aesthetic that permeates the game, because, you know, it's a high fantasy setting. It's found everywhere. You know, that light golden touch to everything is so beautiful to me. Like, I've always been a fan of that in like fantasy settings, and this game just, it gives you that in spades. So this was already one-upping Dark Souls and like the world building and just the visual aesthetics part of the game for me, and I love that right off the bat. So yes, visuals, not the most, you know, insane fidelity, but it's very pleasing, and I would say you would enjoy what you're looking at for the majority of the time you play the game, until you make it to some of those later sections. My god, FromSoftware reminds you that they are just as fucking deranged as ever, but we'll get to that a little later too. Gameplay is the biggest chunk of this section that we'll cover, because that's where most of the meat for these kind of games are. Pause. Now, what I will start off by saying is there is a lot in this game as far as gameplay. It's basically a combination of all of FromSoftware's games, so all the things they've implemented here. As far as the weapon types, you have things from katanas, you have straight swords, you got heavy swords, you have halberds, spears, daggers, axes, hammers, you have magic, so you have sorcery catalysts, you have faith talismans, you have bows. There's everything. You know, any kind of player that you want to be in this game, with enough exploration, you can become that player. If that isn't enough to interest you in this game, if you like high fantasy settings, nothing will. They offer you so many tools in this game to play the way you want to play. It is mind-blowing. The weapon art system from Dark Souls 3 returns, so most weapons have some kind of special ability that can be used depending on the weapon type, and those are found in spades here. You can even customize, so you can put weapon arts on different weapons. So traditionally, you might not find the quick step ability on like a long sword or something, but you can put it on there. So further allowing customization of the playstyle, right? Like if you use a long or a heavy sword, but you want to be a bit more nimble, you can make those adjustments. It's insane how many options they give you. And it might not seem apparent in the beginning of the game, but once you open up and you start exploring, you really start to see just how much stuff is in this game. Like, I kept finding new weapons constantly, and they were different weapons, not just like reskins and shit. And there was so many that I found that started, you know, making me question my build, or I'm like, dude, I want to use this shit because it's so cool. And it never stopped. Even up to the end game, it never stopped. There's so much stuff that I was finding out about armor sets you could get, magic spells that were in the game, and I had a massive list of like sorcery spells, and I was still finding more of them, still finding more insane ones. So once again, from a content standpoint, it's all here, man. It's all here. You do not have to worry about that. Once again, like I said, the weapon art system and the, you know, sorcery, the magic system, it's super expansive. It's the biggest it's ever been in any Souls game, and it just allows you to have customization to no end, so you can play literally whatever character you wanted to play. When I went in, I knew I wanted to be a magic based character, but it was a spell blade of sorts. Like, I had the ability to cast sorceries, but I was still fighting with a melee weapon. And in the game, I found this one katana that was magic based, and its weapon art allows you to fire off these like waves of light, and it's literally like, it was perfect for what I was playing as. And even then, I went on to find more things that could contribute to the build, but the build that I set out to play in the very beginning, I was able to achieve by the end, and that was exactly what I wanted. And I found so many things in the game that if I had other ideas of a build, that one would allow me to get that build going, or I could get this build going. So if you want just a true RPG experience where you go in, create your character, and just play until you get that character you want, you will be able to do that in this game, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. Now I think it's important that we talk about the other massive aspect to this game, and that is just the world and the exploration. So when you're first dropped off into the open world, your map has nothing on it. There's literally nothing on it. You get like a slight hint to say head towards, you know, the castle that you can see off in the distance, but that's it. You can go in any direction you want. You can go interact with anything you want. There are ways to get to areas that are like late game in this game from the very beginning, if you know where to go. Obviously a new player wouldn't know where to go, but you could do it. There's a bunch of different types of activities in the world. You have like ruins that you can go and find usually really cool items in that are guarded by like a mini boss. There are the cave systems that house a bunch of like crafting resources and minerals and rocks and shit for you to upgrade your weapons, again usually accompanied by a boss at the end. There are like church sites you can find that give you like valuable healing items that can increase how much your Estus heals, or you can find golden seeds that increase the Estus capacity so you can carry more. There are dragons that just exist out in the open world that you can come across. There are bandit camps and just roaming enemies who carry like large carriages with chests on them that, you know, you could take down to get what's inside. A lot of the time it's intimidating when you come across these camps at first because the enemies are tough and you usually have to defeat like all of them to get the stuff safely. So, but when you finally do, it's usually worth it, like every time. The exploration in this game rewards you heavily, like heavily. So if you play this game and you don't really explore, you might find it boring because you won't find much stuff. You won't really be leveling. A lot of the enemies will hit really hard. If you try to play it just like a single player game, it'll be tough. The game encourages you, it begs you to just go and find things. Just go anywhere you want, do whatever you want. Like, you don't even have to touch the main story stuff, you know, if you really don't want to. If you just want to spend 10 hours, you know, dicking about, exploring cave systems, fighting dragons, and doing all this, you can do that. And I think that was one of the biggest draws for me as well, is not necessarily having it laid out for me and just being able to go at my own pace. So there were some days where I spent, you know, hours just doing side stuff, just straight up doing side stuff. I knew where the next main legacy dungeon was, but I wasn't interested in the moment to go rush it through. I was just more interested in finding these different places and all the weird shit you could find out in the world and getting all these new upgrades and stuff. And I was enjoying myself doing that. I was having a blast. And when it was time to do the legacy dungeons, I was able to do that as well and just, you know, go through those one after another if I felt that that was what I wanted to do at the time. So the game, again, it's not hand-holdy in that regard. A lot of the time I think new players will have to like resort to guides and such to find some of the cooler stuff because, again, it's that hands-off. They do not tell you anything straightforward. A lot of the time you have to go in and read the item descriptions or like descriptions of weapons or just different drops that you have to give you like clues about what to do with the stuff or like where you could go next. So I will see players resorting to guides a lot in this game, which I do not like. I don't have a problem with that at all. I even did it myself for a lot of the stuff, because if you're interested in a certain piece of content and you don't want to miss it, that's just the best way you're going to find it, which again, in these kind of games, I never have a problem with. So yes, again, there's so much here for you, and you can play at your own pace. And I just think no matter what choice you pick, depending on if you stick with the game or not, it will give you plenty and then some. Ultimately, my playtime for my first run through clocked in at 80 hours, which again, I have not done everything, not even close to it, and that is fucking nuts. You know, I did find a decent amount of the secret bosses, the optional stuff, and I was exploring pretty thoroughly. But you could easily clock a 90, 100 hour playthrough easily. And it reminds me of Persona. First playthrough I ever played of Persona 5, it was about 85 hours. So yeah, again, this game is fucking big. Now, in closing, essentially for the most part, I've had no real negatives to say about this game. It's only been positives, because for the most part, I believe that's what the game gives you. It just gives you a bunch of good things to enjoy about it, and the experience was amazing, mostly all the way through. There is one issue I have with this game though, coming from the other Souls games and kind of trying to understand the position of like newer players and veterans, which ultimately leads me to see this as a potential issue. It really just depends on the person. The later game bosses in this video game are absolutely cracked. They are absolutely fucking cracked. Now, one feature, a key feature I didn't really mention because it was most appropriate to mention in this part of the video, was the summoning bell. Now, in this game, traditionally, you would summon another player, another real life player. It was online co-op, and if you were struggling with a boss, they would help you. That was really the only way you would ever get help, if you were struggling that badly. And if you didn't play online, or, you know, if you just kept failing even with the summon, you just stuck at that boss. You gotta get good, so to speak. In this game, they have summons, which are AI companions that you can summon for difficult open world areas or boss encounters. Now, for most FromSoft veterans, air quote, they trivialize the boss experience because they provide aggro. If they're leveled up properly, a lot of them can actually contribute big sources of damage. So a lot of people, like myself, they try not to use them. Now, I've found certain fights in this game where I absolutely threw away the honor code and I summoned. I do not give a shit, because some of these bosses were just so cracked and on absolute anime time that it wasn't fun. You know, it was not fun. So I resorted to summons, because I wasn't gonna sit through the frustration of what I already believed was a lot of like horseshit and unfairness just to like prove to myself, you know, it just didn't make a lot of sense. You know, and at the core of it, what's important is they are a new feature in the game that are intended to be used. No matter what kind of elitist throne you sit on, that's the situation here. So with that being said, obviously the content in the game, especially the deliberately challenging content, has to be balanced around the fact that you can summon. It has to be balanced around the fact that there's so much more in this game than there's ever been. A lot of the weapon arts are extremely powerful. A lot of the weapons just innately have these effects like bleed and frost buildup. Your character is more powerful. You know, it has a higher ceiling than it has ever had in any Souls game. So obviously, encounters that are designed to be challenging have to account for that. And I 100% understand that. So that's where I believe this issue that I have comes in, with these later game bosses just being absolutely cracked the fuck out, is for that reason. Now, I get it, but at the same time, again, they definitely leaned more towards the frustration side of it, which, let's be real, if you play FromSoft games, you know what frustration is, right? Like, it's not like I've never been frustrated in a FromSoft game, and every boss was just so, you know, mechanically amazing that it was always this fucking honorable duel to the death. I've been frustrated before. I felt like bosses had bullshit attacks. But in this game, it has like gone through the roof. And I just feel like the amount of, ridiculous things these bosses can do, how quick they are, the gap closers they have, it definitely pushes more towards the side of like bullshit frustration than it does, oh, okay, I just need to get better at dodging this attack, or I have to take a better, opening, which is the case still, don't get me wrong. For the most part, they wouldn't put the stuff in the game if it didn't have something the player could do about it. But again, just in this game, I feel like the later game areas, especially the optional ones, which are mainly where my big problem comes in, the areas and the bosses that accompany them were just a little too far on the frustration side. And there were many times where I didn't even want to be in the area anymore. I just would rush to the boss, and that would be a far cry from what I was doing the entire playthrough. I was exploring. But some of these areas, I was just like, no, fuck this. I don't want to be a part of this because this is fucking stupid. So I feel like maybe a lot more people will come to that conclusion, especially newer players. If they even make it that far, you will run up against some of these bosses and you're just like, yeah, this is not fun. And I think that's what's most important at the end of the day, is it should be, a challenge that ultimately gives you enjoyment at the end of it. You shouldn't leave a fight and be like, yeah, I just didn't care, I just wanted that to be done. I feel like if you push more towards that side, whether it's for spectacle, for cool factor, whatever, if it takes that away, I don't think that's a good idea. But I understand it. I completely get it. I finished the game. Like I said, I've beaten most of the content, so it's not like I couldn't do this shit. I've done it. This is just how I feel reflecting on it. And at the moment it was happening, so that's really my only negative. That, again, some of these later game experiences could just be absolutely ridiculous. Again, once the game gets some time and more people finish it and get to that point, I'd be very interested to see what like general consensus is. So again, this was a long one, I know, but it's Elden Ring. How could it not be? I want to thank you guys so much for watching the video. Have you played Elden Ring? Are you interested in it? Do you not like FromSoft games? Share everything down in the comments. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Appreciate you guys listening with me. You have a good one, and until next time.